Hello and welcome back to the latest We Are Sunderland briefing with myself, Dom Shaw, and Scott Wilson, both from We Are Sunderland. And thanks as ever to our partners on the site, as you can see on the bottom of the page there, the Fans Museum and Cospex Opticians. Thanks to those for their support, and thanks to you for watching, listening, wherever you follow us. Do subscribe if you're watching on the YouTube channel, or if you're listening on your podcast platforms, and rate and review. And we're looking back on the win over Sheffield Wednesday on Friday night, which feels like a fair old while ago now, to be fair, but a fair few talking points to come from that. And we'll look ahead to the home game against Cardiff City this weekend. Burnley won again last night, Scott. The gap's still 8 points. It's an awkward gap, isn't it? Where it's unlikely, but it's not completely out of reach. Sunderland just have to keep winning, and would just have to keep winning and hope for an unlikely slip.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at. It probably still feels like Sunderland if there's a game in the next couple where Sunderland lose and both Burnley and Sheffield United win, then that would probably feel like that's the end of it. But until that happens, you're right, Sunderland are still kind of in there. And obviously with them playing first on Friday night, when it did shrink back down to 5 points, you inevitably start thinking, well, you know, if there is a slip up there, then 5 points is certainly not insurmountable. But Burnley and Sheffield United just keep on winning, don't they? I mean, you know, Burnley did it again last night. Obviously against a Cardiff side that Sunderland are going to be up against. Sheffield United just keep on winning. Leeds, all right, they had a draw, didn't they? But you know, they've got that little cushion now. Yeah, it feels like it's extremely unlikely, but you're right, it's not impossible. And until it's impossible, Sunderland have to keep that as their primary target. Because there's plenty of this season left where they're going to have to get their heads around being in the playoffs and what the end of the season looks like, you know, assuming that happens. So until we get that point, keep believing, keep on winning. You just never know.
There's a clip to chop up for social media. And the point, Sunderland are 13 points above 7th place Bristol City. Now, I never for 1 minute thought there's any chance of Sunderland's form completely nosediving and missing out on the top 6. But I think the win over Sheffield Wednesday was just important, just to ensure that you weren't starting to look over your shoulder. And we're still having the conversation here now about the gap above rather than the gap below.
Yeah. And I think especially when Le Bris made all the changes, it was perfectly understandable why he did, and I'm sure we'll get to kind of the nitty-gritty of some of them and where players are within the squad pecking order and all that kind of stuff. But when you make those 5 changes off the back of 2 successive defeats, if that then goes wrong, then I think that does change the mood, and there are questions asked then, and the whole narrative shifts a bit. Like you say, the fact that Sunderland put in a pretty decent display at Sheffield Wednesday, you know, not perfect by any means, but pretty decent, and then won off the back of that and showed a real kind of grit and spirit and everything that we've kind of felt has been good about this Sunderland this season was kind of there on Friday night, then yeah, I think it is a big positive. And like you say, it just means we continue to look up rather than down, which hopefully we can continue doing for a bit longer.
And what did you make of the changes? Because I'd been to the academy the day before the game, and Le Bris kind of made it pretty clear that he was going to shuffle his pack in the running. He talked about needing to keep his squad fresh. But we do a predicted team, don't we, on the day of the game? I would never have predicted the team that they went with. Was it a reaction to performances? Was it like a kick up the backside for some? Was it just a opportunity to rest players? How did you read his selection? And what did it mean for the team on Saturday and the next week or two?
I mean, I'm like you. I was surprised there was as many changes, but I don't think. I think it was much more rest players, just shuffle things around a little bit, rather than we need a reaction. We need to, like you say, kick some players up the backside. All of that. I mean, you know, obviously Lefay and Ballard are out with injury, so they're out of the equation, and they're going to be for a little while yet. So okay, we know that. So you need to get Mundle back into the team. Clearly, Metham is now your key centre-half alongside Luke O'Nien. To a certain extent, they picked themselves. Dennis Serkin, probably a massive surprise he was left out. He probably looked like at various stages he could maybe have done with a little rest. Isidore maybe more of a surprise, but you've got to give Mayenda a run every now and then, I think, haven't you? And he obviously took his chance really, really well. I thought he was the man of the match. I thought he was, you know, not just for his goals, for everything else. I thought he was Sunderland's best player at Hillsborough. Chris Rigg coming out again, not a massive surprise. He's played an awful lot of football. You know, I remember writing off the back of the Watford defeat, it felt like Rigg and/or Bellingham probably needed a bit of a break. It wouldn't surprise me at some stage between now and the next international break if Job is out of the team for a game, because I think that's probably a move that Le Bris will want to make as well at some point. So, you know, yeah, a surprise there was as many, but if you look at them all individually, I think there's reasons for all of them. And I don't think it's a case of Le Bris saying, right, after 2 defeats, we need to turn everything upside down and shake everything around it. No, I don't think it was that. I think it was just, you know, a little bit of tiredness, a little bit of mental fatigue, bit of legginess that was evident in that home defeat. I keep on saying Watford. It was Hull, wasn't it? I don't know why I keep on saying Watford. The home defeat to Hull. And a reaction to that saying, you know, there are players here also who need a game. Alan Brown needed a run out. Mayenda needed to start a game, really, and be given the chance from 90 minutes. As I've said, Mundle clearly needed to come in because he's going to be the first choice on the left-hand side, certainly until Watson gets back properly fit. So I think there were lots of reasons why he did that.
And I guess the problem for Le Bris, well, not the problem, but what'll make it difficult this weekend is you rest Isidore, but Mayenda scores twice. So what do you do on Saturday? Can you drop a centre forward after he scored 2 goals? But will he want to leave Isidore out for 2 games on the bounce? Will he play on both?
Well, he could. I mean, he has done at various stages this season, although he's pretty strong, Le Bris, on saying that's not his preference, and he's very much only been doing it for very specific games when the opposition lend themselves to playing like that. I think he'll play Isidore. I think that for the next few weeks, we might well see in and out Isidore and Mayenda. I think Isidore is his number one still. If it was a playoff semi-final first leg on Saturday, Isidore will be playing and Mayenda will be on the bench. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think that's probably what will happen, but I think it's more that like I say, wouldn't surprise me if Isidore started on Saturday, but in one of the games between now and the international break, it was Mayenda again, because I think he's seen enough from Mayenda probably at Hillsborough to think, right, well, I can trust you to lead the line here. You know, you are a completely different player to the one that we saw kind of not getting a game for Hibs last season, not looking particularly on it in pre-season and all of that. Yeah, that's out the window now. Mayenda is a trusted player who Le Bris feels can start a game if he needs him to. And like I say, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw a bit of chopping and changing between now and the end of the season. But on the kind of understanding that if push came to shove, Isidore will be the one start.
Sunderland have altered the transfer model, haven't they, in the last 12 months or so? We've seen that. But I think Mayenda is evidence of if you are bringing in young players from overseas and they're not an overnight success, especially if they're 18, 19, 20, don't write them off straight away. So Abdullahi is a bad example because he's been injured. But
Alexic is a better one.
Alexic, yeah, is a fine example, isn't it? Like Mayenda last season, Mowbray always said, didn't he, on and off the record, he saw something in Mayenda, but he was too raw. He wasn't ready. But never would you have predicted, or could you have predicted last season, really, that Mayenda could be trusted leading the line for a team that was still in the mix for automatic promotion?
No, absolutely. And from a position at the start of the summer where we were quite loudly bemoaning the fact that Sunderland still didn't really have a striker and what were they doing? And every week on these vids. Well, I mean, Wilson Isidore is clearly a 10, 15 million pound striker that Sunderland now have on a permanent deal. I don't think Mayenda's that far behind. I mean, I'm not saying if you saw that Eliezer Mayenda tomorrow, you'd get 10 million for him, but he's on that curve. He's on that development trajectory. I mean, he's still incredibly young. I don't think it's inconceivable that at some stage in his Sunderland career, we're talking about Mayenda as a 10, 15, 20 million pound player. And like you said, fair play to Sunderland. That's been patience with Mayenda because, there's various points where it felt like he was close to being written off in the way that clearly Roussin has been. Well, we'll see with Abdullahi. Obviously he hasn't had a chance, but hey, it's potentially hurtling that way, isn't it? Let's be brutally honest about it. And it felt like Mayenda could go down that route. Now, obviously, while it might not necessarily have worked on the pitch, maybe the loan deal has worked for him in terms of just allowing him to grow up The whole kind of personal development as well as on pitch development. But ultimately, he's done it on the pitch this season, hasn't he? Whenever he's had a chance, he's pretty much taken it with both hands, and he now looks like, you say, a completely different player to the one before. And I threw Alexic in there because it's pretty easy to view his season as a massive disappointment, and in some respects it has been. He was in the full Serbian squad when he came over in the summer, wasn't he? So I think there was a degree of expectation that, okay, he might not hit the ground running, but by Christmas time he should be there or thereabouts. Second half of the season he should certainly be knocking on the door to be a regular starter. Well, he's a long way off that, but so was Mayenda at this stage of his first season. So, I think that's right. I think Alexic does need to be given some time, and similar for any other that type of player that Sunderland bring in.
And so was Romaine Mundle in the second half of last season. Had you said had you said this time last year, Jack Clark's going to go in the summer and Romaine Mundle is going to be the replacement, there would have been understandable and at the time fair disgruntlement, a lack of ambition, a lack of planning, when actually it was the opposite, wasn't it? It was like clearly they've benefited from the fact that Mundle has hit the ground running this season, but there's no doubt that having that 6 months just to get his feet under the table and settle in has been a huge benefit to him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought you could see on Friday night, it wasn't his best game. Things didn't really come off for him, but I thought you could see immediately that he is a very different left-sided attacker than Sunderland have had with Le Bris for the last month. I'm not saying better by any stretch.
He's a winger. He's a winger,
yeah,
isn't
exactly, but definitely different. He's direct, isn't he? He gets the ball and he wants to run at the fullback and either cut inside, maybe get a shot away, every now and then go on the outside to whip a cross away. But he's direct and he plays forward. Le Bris, brilliant footballer. We know that. He's done superbly since he came in. He's going to be a massive miss when he was injured. But he was much more of a kind of technician who would drift, who would link play, would look to pick little pockets. Mundle is much more head down, get down the wing, cut inside, get a shot away, get a cross in, make something happen. And I think Sunderland could benefit from that in games between now and the end of the season, undoubtedly.
Tommy Watson,
and of course, you've got Watson to come back into the mix.
Well, yeah, and on the site on We Are Sunderland this morning, we've got Le Bris talking about Mundle and Watson, and I asked him last week, can you get them both in the same team? And he said, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. They are both at home. They are both at the best. They're both most comfortable on the left side. Le Bris kind of suggested what we're most likely to do is have one starting games and one finishing games. Now, for the one finishing games, it's a hard sell. You're a sub, aren't you? So if Tommy Watson's on the bench every week between now and the end of the season, I'm not saying he's going to be, but that wouldn't go down too well with him, you wouldn't think. I asked him whether either could play on the right, and he said, well, it's a possibility, but they are both left wingers at the best. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out when the ball.
Yeah. I mean, they could play on the right, couldn't they? Clearly, they could, but I haven't seen anything from them really to suggest that would play to either of their strengths. And obviously, you've got Roberts there, who all right, hasn't necessarily had a stellar season, but has had a pretty reliable and consistent season. And I certainly think, again, if it was a really big game that Sunderland were playing in, i.e. a playoff match, Le Bris would go with Roberts down the right-hand side.
Because he talks about that triangle he loves, doesn't he?
Exactly, yeah. So it feels like exactly that Mundle and Watson will kind of, to a certain degree, swap minutes between now and the end of the season once they're fit. One starting, one coming on with half an hour to go. I mean, I guess it's difficult because you don't want to write things off, but let's be brutally honest. I think we probably both expect we're going to get to a stage this season where the last month is ticking over, really. And while that's going to be a really important month in terms of keeping momentum going, not switching off, making sure that if it is to be the playoffs, you're going in on a bit of form and a bit of momentum and a bit of wind in your sails, it will still give you an opportunity to take players in and out that you wouldn't perhaps have if every game was must win to get into the playoffs. So, I envisage a scenario in the latter stage of the season where Mundle starts 1 week, Watson starts the next, Isidore starts 1 week, Mayenda starts the next, Rig drops out at one game every so often. Job potentially drops out, especially if Lefay is back and Sunderland want to get some minutes into him before they're actually into the playoffs. I think Sunderland will have the opportunity to do that between now and the end of the season, just by dint of their league position and the fact that, unless things change absolutely massively in the next 4 or 5 games, the last 4 or 5 games, Sunderland are probably not going to be able to get into the top 2 and, pretty much definitely not going to be dropping out of the playoffs.
And the thing with Mundle and Watson is they're both coming back from pretty serious injuries, or if not serious injuries, long layoffs. Have both been out 2, 3, 4 months. So you would want to be in a position where you can manage the workload coming back.
Yeah, there's definitely an argument where you wouldn't want to be playing Romaine Mundle every minute of every game between now and the end of the season, just like you say, because he's had that lengthy layoff, and the same will be true of Watson. So yeah, it feels like a decent position that for Sunderland. Like I say, the only thing in the back of your mind is how many times have we seen teams that finish 3rd or 4th and have that kind of end of the season, then not be able to pick it back up in the playoffs. It feels like we're hedging towards where that's going to be the pivotal thing for Sunderland in the rest of this season.
Well, let's look at the next 5 fixtures there across the bottom. Cardiff home, Preston home, then Coventry away, Millwall home, West Brom away. Those 2 games, Cardiff home, Preston home, feel like you need to win them both. Burnley are at home to Luton on Saturday, which looks like a nailed-on win.
Yeah.
Then at home to West Brom on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Sheffield United at home to Preston on Saturday, which you fancy. Then at home to Bristol City. Bristol City are playing well, but Sheffield Wednesday are strong. But then after that, Sheffield United are away to Sheffield Wednesday and at home to Coventry. So if you take that trio of games, Bristol City home, Sheffield Wednesday away, Coventry home, that I know there's 2 home games in there, but that's a tricky trio. So Sunderland have to get 6 points, don't they? And if the top 2 still alive, get 6 points and see where we sit, see how the position looks next week.
I mean, I know we've said this at various points this season. It feels like if Sunderland are genuinely going to be in the top 2, they're going to have to take 6 points for these next 2 games because, as you said, the likelihood is that Burnley and Sheffield United, if not taking 6 points, will probably take at least 3 each. So for Sunderland to reduce that gap, they're really going to have to win both of those games. And probably even more so because then 2 of the next 3, Coventry away, West Brom away, well, Sunderland have done well in away games this season. It's certainly not out of the question that they can go to both of those games and win them, but they're difficult places to go to at the minute. Coventry clearly with a massive momentum shift since Lampard's gone in there, and West Brom right in and around it in terms of the playoffs under Mowbray. So, I think if Sunderland weren't to take 6 points from these next 2 back-to-back home games, there's every chance they'll be even further away from the top 2 than they currently are, and that might well feel like the end of it then.
That Coventry game is going to be interesting because, and I know we've got 11 games left, so this feels premature, but at the minute, a 4th place finish looks most likely for Sunderland. So you'd be playing the team that finished 5th, obviously, in the playoffs. And again, at the minute, now there's 5 points separating 5th and 11th, so clearly you can't make any strong definitive statements on this. But Coventry are flying. Coventry, of all the teams in that hunt for those 2 remaining playoff places, Coventry look the strongest and the most in form at the minute. If you were going to have a punt at the minute, you'd probably guess they were going to finish 5th, which would mean 2 legs there. Like clearly we're still too far out for it to be a rehearsal or anything like that. But it's still going to be an interesting game to see how the shape.
Yeah, we are, and you're right. And the mind casts back a little bit to 2 seasons ago when Borough played Coventry in the playoffs, didn't they, and lost to them, and played them in the league a couple of weeks before the end of the season. Last day. Yeah. Now, like you say, we're not there with Sunderland, but that game clearly did have a major impact on the playoffs and the way that those games went and the tactics that were employed and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a bit of a stretch, but it's not. It's it will be in the thinking to a degree of both clubs, I think, because like you say, that certainly more so in Sunderland because, as we keep saying, it feels like Sunderland are pretty much nailed on to be in the playoffs. So they've got plenty of time to start thinking about what that looks like, looking at potential opponents, putting plans in place and all of this. Coventry, they've been on this great run, but they've still got to just get their heads down and get into the playoffs at the minute. I think that will be an interesting. I just think that and the West Brom away game, both of them will be playoff type games in the, going away to good sides with a lot to play for, be decent atmospheres, all that kind of stuff. That will be, at least in some degree, akin to what Sunderland will get in the away leg of the playoff semi-final. So I think both of those games will be interesting to see how Sunderland look in those kind of environments.
Just before we wrap up, you were at the North East Writers Football Awards the weekend, and Chris Rigg and Job shared the Young Player Awards. Nailed on winners, weren't they? The only question there would have been who out of the two was going to win it. Well, they shared it, so
yeah. I've got to admit, I voted for Rigg, full disclosure, but they did finish bang on level.
Was that the first time, or?
There's been a shared winner of the overall award.
There has, and I'll tell you what it was, because I was looking at the weekend. It was 2007, Dean Whitehead and Nyron Nosworthy.
Nyron, yeah.
I was looking back at the winners at the weekend.
I mean, Nyron Nosworthy, absolute cult legend. Dean Whitehead, did a job for Sunderland, but my God, it says something about the state of North East football that year, doesn't it? I think even the biggest diehards would say if that is the absolute creme de la creme, then wow. But no, listen, both absolutely fully deserved winners, and as they both kind of said in the interviews that the club put out in and around it, a big feather in the cap and pat on the back for Sunderland's willingness to turn to youth and give young players a chance. I think for both players, cliche alert here, but it's very, very easy to forget how young they are. Rigg especially. 100%. It feels like he's been around for 2 seasons now, and yet he's 17.
Yeah.
Job, more than 100 senior Football League appearances under his belt, still a teenager. What those two could go on to achieve in their careers is frightening, really. They can be absolutely what they want to be when they're doing what they're doing now at their age and this stage of their careers. Then, there's a massive future ahead of them. And I think the other thing as well that will clearly help them, really level-headed, nice lads. And that does make a difference, especially when it's young players you're talking about. And they're going to have everything thrown at them in the next decade or so. They're going to have ups, they're going to have downs, they're going to have high points, low points, good moves, bad moves, good games, but all of that. But from what I see of them, and probably importantly from the family they've got around them and the support network they've got around them and all of that, I would have no worries about those two kicking on and having successful careers in the absolute top level of football.
Let's hope they're playing at the top level next season in red and white. And let's hope Sunderland beat Cardiff at the weekend and keep rolling on and give us another
opportunity. It's you there at the weekend, isn't it?
Talk about the automatic promotion again next week. Yeah, I'm there at the week. I'm there I'm there both. I'm there Cardiff.
That's right.
And Preston on Tuesday. Yeah. So
thoughts then? What do we think? What do you think of Cardiff?
I think Sunderland will win them both.
Yeah.
I think at this stage of the season, so Cardiff are still right in amongst it, really, at the bottom.
Yeah.
They're only a place above the relegation zone, but
they scored against Burnley, which is
which is quite something. It's funny at the bottom, innit? You've got Derby 29, Plymouth 30, Luton 31, and then a 5-point gap to Cardiff, Stoke, and Hull. That was a big win for Hull last night. They're 2 big wins then.
Hull. I mean, to be fair, Hull, for all that Sunderland had an off day, Hull's performance at the Stadium of Light certainly suggested to me that they're going to be okay. I thought they looked a good team that day. I thought that, they've got some quality in that side as well that most of the teams, pretty much I would say the rest of the teams they're up against at the bottom just don't have.
I think Sunderland will just have too much for Cardiff. And I think Preston, Paul Heckingbottom teams, you know what you're going to get, don't you? Hard to beat. They've got an FA Cup quarter-final.
I was going to say they've got a quarter-final, which, I know.
And that is going to be their priority, isn't it? Because they are 15th in the league, 9 points adrift of the top 6. And well, what, 12, 13 points, 12 points ahead of the relegation zone. They're finishing mid-table, which is where Preston finish every single season.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I fancy Sunderland to get 6 points. Then those next three.
Yeah, and I do think if they get 6, for all that I don't think both Burnley and Sheffield United will take 6. I think one of them will not win a game. So I think if Sunderland can take 6 points, they will edge a little bit closer to at least one of those sides. And then, I think we'll be talking with 9 games left. Well, they are very much still in this.
Let's see. Let's hope so. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. As I said at the top, if you're watching on YouTube, then do subscribe to the channel. Just tap the button below and subscribe. We appreciate that. If you're listening on your podcast platforms, then rate and review there as well. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the game on Saturday if you're going, and we'll be back after the Preston game next week to reflect on the 2 home games and hopefully 2 home wins for Sunderland. Take care.